fictional art for
We'll
entertainment.
be reading The Voice of Cindy.
Ready when you are.
All right, let's begin. The year is 2030. The scent of damp earth and crushed eucalyptus hung heavy in the cooling air. On the screened-in porch, the light was changing fast, bleeding from a bruised purple into a deep velvety indigo along the horizon. Tom leaned back in his wicker chair, his fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug of chamomile tea. Across the small, glass-topped table, Cindy sat with her ankles crossed, watching a single persistent moth flutter against the outside of the wire mesh. The steady hum of cicadas filled the pauses between their words, a timeless sound contrasting sharply with the topic of their conversation. "It's the equity stakes that get me," Tom said, his voice quiet, almost subdued. He took a sip of his tea, watching the steam rise and vanish. "When I was growing up, the government and big business fought each other, or at least they pretended to. Regulators gave fines, corporations lobbied. Now, the Department of Commerce just buys a $44 billion chunk of intel. They aren't just referees anymore, Cindy. They own the teams."
Cindy turned her mug in a slow circle on the table.
"And the teams own them right back. It rusts like a marriage where neither side can afford a divorce. If the government is the main shareholder and the biggest customer, who is the business actually serving? It's certainly not us."
That's exactly it, Tom agreed, leaning forward. We aren't even the consumers anymore. If people are broke and wages don't match the cost of living like we saw with Hawaii and Puerto Rico, the old capitalist triangle just snaps. Businesses used to need workers to make things, and they needed those same workers to buy them. Now, with automation and AI, business only needs the state. They sell their infrastructure and tech directly to Washington. The public is just bypassed. Cindy sighed, looking out into the darkening yard. Fireflies were starting to blink in the shadows of the old oak tree. It feels like a weird kind of feudalism, Tom. Remember those stimulus checks years ago? We thought it was a lifeline. But looking back, that money never stayed with us. It was just routed through our bank accounts and went straight to the property monopolies, the utility giants, and the massive food conglomerates. It's like we're just conduits for state money to flow back into corporate hands.
"And think about the scale of it," Tom said, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the floorboards. "That's the part that keeps me up. People always point to history. They talk about Rome or Soviet state socialism or the company towns of the Industrial Revolution. But this has literally never happened in world history before."
Never, Cindy echoed softly.
"In the past," Tom continued, "if a king or a government wanted to control a population, they needed an army of bureaucrats, inspectors, and soldiers on every street corner. It was sloppy, expensive, and always collapsed. Today, the business-government alliance controls the literal digital architecture of survival. If they control the cloud, the automated supply chains, the electronic payment rails, and the algorithms that manage employment, they don't need an army on the street. The cage is invisible, and it runs on software." The porch grew darker, the twilight officially giving way to night. The only light came from the soft amber glow of a single lamp inside the living room, casting long shadows across the screens.
So how does it play out? Cindy asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. If the illusion of the free market is completely broken, and the top 1% just passes virtual wealth back and forth via central bank interventions, what happens to everyone else on the outside?
Tom looked down into his empty mug, then out into the dark. "I think that is what everyone is trying to figure out. Some people think it freezes into a permanent stagnation, a quiet, managed corporate hierarchy where nothing really changes and no one can disrupt the status quo. Others think the system eventually chokes itself to death because an economy can't actually survive without organic human consumption." He looked up at her, a faint, wry smile touching his lips. "But the truth is, nobody actually knows. We're living in a giant macroeconomic experiment and we rule the test subjects."
Cindy reached across the table, her hand briefly brushing his. Let's hope the walls of the porch hold up, she said quietly, looking back out at the dark yard.
They sat in silence for a long time after that, watching the fireflies rise from the grass, two people on the edge of a world shifting into something entirely unrecognizable. The hum of the cicadas faded as Tom slid the screen door shut, locking it with a sharp metallic click. The living room was cooler, illuminated only by the soft amber glow of a single ceramic lamp and the faint blue standby light of their television. Cindy dropped into the corner of the fabric sofa, pulling her knees up to her chest. Tom handed her a fresh mug of warm tea before sitting on the opposite end, staring at the empty hearth. "It's the lack of seeing the gears change that makes it feel so heavy," Tom said, his voice bouncing softly off the drywall. "We always thought a massive economic shift would look like a movie, riots in the streets, total collapse. But sitting here, it looks exactly like the present. The furniture's the same, the streets are the same, but beneath the surface, everything has frozen."
Cindy nodded, looking around the room. That's the illusion, isn't it? It's a permanent snapshot. Whatever you owned, wherever you managed to buy or rent when the music stopped, that's just where you are now. The latter has been taken away.
Exactly, Tom said. The cost of moving from area to area is completely locked out now. If you want to move from here to a higher cost hub, the automated real estate algorithms and private equity monopolies have priced it so far out of reach that it is a mathematical impossibility. People are essentially stuck in their geographic zones. You live where you are, period.
Like the 1400s, Cindy murmured, her eyes reflecting the amber lamplight. Think about it. We have looped all the way back to the feudal era. Back then, a peasant was tied to the land they were born on. They didn't have passports. They didn't move to the next kingdom for a better job. The local lord owned the mill, the fields, and the housing. Today, Wall Street and tech monopolies own the digital infrastructure, the housing portfolios, and the payment rails. We didn't move forward to the year 2030. We just modernized the year 1400.
But with one luxury the peasants didn't have, Tom pointed out, gesturing to the silent television screen: the illusion of mobility. Some people can still visit other areas. If you save up your digital stipend or manage to hustle enough side jobs, you can buy a tightly regulated carbon-tracked ticket to see another zone. You can visit paradise, but you can never afford to stay there. You have to go back to your assigned quadrant when your time is up.
Cindy took a slow sip of her tea, the warmth radiating through her hands. It is a permanent international version of the COVID-19 lockdowns in a way. That's what this layout actually is. The pandemic wasn't a temporary emergency, it was the blueprint. Everyone stays inside their designated bubble, the government pumps out digital loops of funding to keep people fed, and those funds are instantly vacuumed back by the corporate monopolies providing the calories and the streaming media.
And the only people who actually go out to work are the exact same ones who were forced to work during the lockdowns, Tom added, leaning his head back against the sofa. The essential workers. That is the entire labor market of the future. If you aren't an elite engineer running the AI algorithms or a high-level state broker, your only option for actual work is physical, foundational labor. Driving the autonomous freight overrides, maintaining the dark warehouses, harvesting the corporate agriculture, or running the restaurants, emergency services, and hospitals, the areas human society absolutely needs and that haven't been replaced by robots yet.
And the creators, the entertainment, Cindy added softly. Don't forget them. Singing, writing, acting, sports, all those areas where a human performing in person now commands larger sums of value. We can no longer attend these events in person because the cost is simply too high. Instead, we watch the wealthy attend them from our TVs and mobile screens. Going to public parks has become a luxury asset reserved for the elite, much like it was back in 1910, and global travel has gone the same way. We are either maintaining the machine, or we are the digital entertainment keeping the rest of the locked-in population quiet.
Tom looked toward the dark window, where the reflection of their living room superimposed itself over the black outline of the trees outside. He turned and looked back at the television, his expression softening with a sudden, sobering realization. Cindy, we're very lucky to just be where we are when things clicked into place, Tom said quietly. The other 90% of the world is not as fortunate as us.
Cindy pulled her blanket up higher around her shoulders and looked back at Tom. She offered a small, quiet smile, the reality of his words settling over the room. We truly are, she said.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because coming out of that reading, I am just sitting here trying to process the sheer weight of what they're mapping out.
It's a lot. It really is a lot.
God, it's so much. And it's such a quiet scene, right? It's just two people drinking tea as the sun goes down.
Right, very mundane.
Yeah, super mundane. But what they're casually discussing is nothing less than, well, the absolute death of traditional capitalism.
Totally.
And the very first thing the text forces us to confront, which I found fascinating, is this idea that the government and corporations are no longer adversaries.
Yes, that's a huge shift.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Tom talks about the Department of Commerce buying a $44 billion chunk of Intel and realizing they aren't the referees anymore. They own the teams.
What's fascinating here is that it completely upends how we are taught the world works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because in our traditional understanding of the economy, there's supposed to be this healthy, well, almost adversarial tension between the state and the private sector.
Right, like checks and balances.
Exactly. Regulators exist to find corporations when they step out of line, right? And then corporations spend millions lobbying those regulators to get their way.
Oh, yeah.
So there is friction. And theoretically, that friction is the safety net that protects the everyday consumer.
But in this 2030 scenario, that friction is just gone.
It's totally gone. The state isn't just regulating the market anymore. The state has become the primary shareholder and the biggest customer.
Okay, but wait, I'm trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this because it completely breaks my understanding of basic supply and demand.
Yeah, it breaks the whole model.
Like Tom says, the old capitalist triangle snaps. Now, businesses historically needed workers to manufacture their goods,
Hmm.
and then they needed those exact same workers to have enough disposable income to buy those goods.
Henry Ford, right. Pay the workers enough so they can buy the cars.
Exactly. Ford's model. But in this story, because of AI and automation, the businesses don't need the workers to make things anymore. That part I get.
Right, the robots build the cars.
Yeah, the robots do the work. But if the people are broke, who is buying the stuff? Like, if I am a massive corporation, how am I making a profit if consumers don't exist anymore? Are they literally just passing tax dollars back and forth in a closed loop?
It's wild you bring that up, because that is exactly the paradigm shift the story is pointing out.
Really? Just a closed loop?
Yeah, they are essentially passing money in a closed loop, and they are doing it by fundamentally changing who the customer is.
Oh, wow.
The public is no longer the consumer.
Right.
The state is the consumer.
So the government buys everything.
Exactly. The corporations are selling their infrastructure, their tech, their supply chain management systems directly to Washington. It's this massive business-to-government model, just scaled to infinity.
That's insane.
The population isn't the customer anymore. The population has become the inventory that the government pays these corporations to manage.
The inventory. Wow. You're just managed.
Yeah.
I was trying to visualize this while we were reading, and the best analogy I could come up with is a rigged casino.
Oh, I like that. Walk me through it.
Okay, so in a normal casino, you know the house has a mathematical edge, right?
Obviously.
The odds are against you, but they still give you free drinks. They still give you a comped room sometime.
Because they want you to stay.
Right, because they fundamentally need you at the table playing the game. You are the source of the money.
Right.
But in this 2030 scenario, it's like the house doesn't even need you to play. They just need you to physically sit in the chair so they can use your seat to legally bet against the dealer.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They're using the citizens' chips to place their own bets. You're just a prop in their game with the illusion of participation.
That is a phenomenal way to picture it. And honestly, if we expand on that casino analogy, it explains the mechanism behind Cindy's point about the stimulus checks.
The pandemic checks, yeah.
Right. During the real-world pandemic, when those checks went out, they were framed as a direct lifeline to citizens.
Like, here is help for you to survive.
Exactly. But the story shifts the lens on that completely. In this future, Cindy realizes the money didn't stay with them. It merely passed through their bank accounts and went immediately into the pockets of property monopolies, utility giants, and food conglomerates.
She uses the word conduits.
Yeah.
That is such a chilling word to me. It totally strips away any agency from the individual.
You're just pipes.
You aren't an economic actor making choices. You're just the plumbing used to route state money back into corporate hands.
Exactly. And think about the historical context Tom brings into this. We have a tendency when things get scary or shift dramatically to look at the present and try to map it onto the past.
Right, we always do that.
We say, oh, this is like the fall of Rome, or this feels like Soviet state socialism.
Sure.
But Tom realizes that this specific iteration of power, this closed loop, has never existed before.
Because the tech didn't exist.
Right. To control a massive population in the past, a state needed physical force. They needed an army of bureaucrats, inspectors, soldiers on every street corner.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Right.
Because eventually the soldiers on the corner, they get tired or they want more pay.
Or they join the rebellion.
Exactly. They start sympathizing with the people they are supposed to be controlling. There is a human element of failure built into physical oppression. It's sloppy.
It's incredibly sloppy. And historically, it always collapses under its own financial and administrative weight.
Right.
But the 2030 scenario describes an invisible cage. The business-government alliance doesn't need soldiers because they control the digital architecture of survival itself.
The software.
Yes, they control the cloud, the automated supply chains, the electronic payment rails, the algorithms managing employment. When the cage runs on software, you don't need a guard at the door.
Wow.
The concept of the door simply ceases to exist in the code. It is an entirely frictionless, automated form of control.
You know, that makes me think, if I can't interact with the economy and I'm just a conduit for corporate money, and this invisible software cage is running my life,
Yeah.
what keeps people from just leaving?
Right.
Why wouldn't you just pack up your car and drive somewhere else to start over, like people have done for centuries?
That is the crucial question, and it's exactly what the story pivots to when they move off the porch and into the living room. The cage isn't just financial, it becomes physical.
Right. Tom talks about the scariest part being the lack of seeing the gears change.
Hmm.
The living room looks the same, the streets look the same, but underneath, the whole system has frozen. And the way they explain why you can't leave is honestly the most terrifying part of the whole narrative for me.
Because it's invisible.
Because it doesn't rely on barbed wire or border checkpoints, it relies on math.
Real estate algorithms.
Yes. The mathematical impossibility of moving. Tom explains that automated real estate algorithms and private equity monopolies have priced relocation completely out of reach. So if you live in a low-income area, you can never, ever move to a higher-cost hub for a better opportunity.
Never. The numbers just won't let you.
Exactly. Again, my gaming brain kicked in here. It is exactly like playing a massive open-world video game where you simply haven't purchased the expansion pack.
Oh, that's such a good analogy.
I know. You can stand at the edge of your starting zone, you can see the other cities beautifully rendered on your screen in the distance, but the moment you try to walk over there, your character just walks in place against an invisible wall.
Yeah.
The code simply will not let you pass.
And let's dive into why those algorithms operate that way, because it's not just a glitch, right? It's a feature of this new system.
Oh, totally.
In this future, if the corporate state alliance wants to maintain total stability, social mobility is actually a massive risk factor.
Wait, really? Why is it a risk?
Well, think about it. If people are constantly moving, changing social strata, building new communities, that creates unpredictability.
Oh, I see.
Unpredictability is bad for algorithms. So the algorithms aren't just reacting to the market, they are actively managing risk by evaluating a zip code and mathematically walling it off.
So they artificially inflate the prices on purpose.
Yes. They price the housing, the rent, even the cost of a moving truck so astronomically high that it chemically removes the option of relocation from the human brain.
Which brings up Cindy's incredible historical parallel. She compares this setup not to the future, but to the past.
Yeah, the 1400s.
She says we haven't moved forward to 2030, we've just modernized the year 1400. We've returned to feudalism.
It's a brilliant connection. Think about your own neighborhood right now. Have you noticed how much harder it is to just pack up and move to a new city today compared to maybe 10 or 20 years ago?
Oh, definitely. It's so expensive.
Right. The story takes that exact anxiety you might be feeling and stretches it to this terrifying extreme. In the feudal era, a peasant was inextricably tied to the land of their birth.
Right, they were serfs.
Exactly. They couldn't just pack up and walk to the neighboring kingdom to find a lord who paid better wages. They were geographically locked in.
Because they didn't have the means.
And the local lord owned everything. The mill where they ground their wheat, the fields they worked, the hovel they slept in.
And in this story, Wall Street and the tech monopolies are the new local lords.
Precisely.
They own the digital infrastructure, the servers, the massive housing portfolios, and the payment rails. They don't need to own the literal dirt you stand on because they own the digital layer sitting right on top of it.
Exactly. But as Tom notes, this modernized feudalism comes with a very specific, very cruel luxury that medieval peasants did not have.
What's that?
The illusion of mobility, the carbon track ticket.
Oh, right, the digital stipend.
Yeah.
So you can save up your little government allowance, you hustle a few side jobs, and you buy a tightly regulated ticket to visit another zone.
Just a visit.
Yeah, you can visit paradise, but you can never afford to stay there. You have to go back to your assigned quadrant when your time is up.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, let's unpack the psychology of that for a second. Why give them the ticket at all? Why not just lock the doors completely?
To keep them from losing their minds.
Exactly. If you lock someone in a room and tell them they can never leave, eventually they will try to tear down the door. Despair breeds rebellion.
Right.
But if you give them just a taste of the wider world, a week in a beautiful resort zone once every few years, you give them something to look forward to.
Little carrot on a stick?
Exactly. You make them feel like they still have a sliver of freedom while mathematically ensuring they can never actually claim it. It is a psychological pressure release valve designed by an algorithm.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm stuck in this designated geographic bubble and my stimulus money is just instantly vacuumed up by the corporate lords, what am I actually waking up to do every day? Like, how does a society like that function on a Tuesday morning?
That brings us to Cindio's deeply unsettling observation about the COVID-19 lockdowns.
Right.
In this timeline, the lockdowns were not a temporary emergency measure. They were the blueprint.
The blueprint for permanence. That phrase really got under my skin.
It's so eerie.
Because during the actual pandemic, we all thought of the lockdowns as a pause button.
Right, 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Exactly. It was a temporary, jarring interruption until things could eventually go back to normal. But in this 2030 narrative, the pause button got stuck.
Yeah, it became the new normal.
It became the permanent operating system for human society. Everyone stays inside their designated bubble, the government pumps out those digital loops of funding to keep people fed, and the monopolies vacuum it back up by providing the baseline calories and the internet access.
Which fundamentally redefines the nature of human labor in this future. Tom explains that the only people who physically leave their homes for work are the exact same people who were forced to work during the historical lockdowns.
The essential workers.
The term they use is the essential workers, yes.
Now wait, I have to push back on how that term is being deployed in this 2030 reality.
Okay, how so?
Because remember, during the actual pandemic, we framed essential workers as a massive badge of honor.
We did.
We were banging pots and pans for them from our balconies, making signs, thanking them for keeping society running. But in this story, being an essential worker doesn't feel like a badge of honor at all. It feels like a life sentence.
Yes. That's exactly what makes it so incredibly dark. All of that cultural goodwill, all those pots and pans, they've been stripped away and weaponized.
Wow.
In 2030, being an essential worker isn't a badge of honor. It's a trap. It means you are relegated to the physical, foundational labor required to keep the machine running for everyone else.
Because you're doing the jobs the robots can't do yet.
Exactly. The text describes a very stark binary class system. Basically, there is no middle class anymore. The ladder hasn't just been pulled up, it's been dismantled and burned.
Gone entirely.
Gone. You are either in the penthouse, working as an elite engineer running the AI algorithms, or a high-level state broker, or you are in the basement doing the heavy lifting.
And there's nothing in between.
Nothing. You are driving the autonomous freight, overrides when the computers glitch. You are maintaining the dark warehouses, harvesting the corporate agriculture, or staffing the emergency rooms. There is zero in between.
It's just architects and manual laborers.
Basically, yes.
So if you aren't one of the elite architects in the penthouse and you aren't one of the foundational manual laborers in the basement, you're just sitting in your living room,
Yep.
receiving a digital stipend that instantly goes back to a food delivery corporation.
You are. And that raises a massive red flag for any historian or sociologist looking at this system.
Why is that?
Because in any historically oppressive system, if you have a massive population that is economically disenfranchised, meaning they have no money, no power, and no prospects, and they are geographically locked in a small area, lacking any meaningful daily purpose,
They revolt.
they will eventually revolt. People need purpose. If you strip that away, the system will collapse under the weight of its own inequity unless that population is fiercely, relentlessly pacified.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that perfectly explains why Cindy brings up the entertainment industry.
Right.
The text explicitly lays out how they are pacified. Cindy talks about the creators, the singers, the actors, the athletes, the writers.
The human element.
Yes. Because we live in a world where AI and algorithms are running the show, in-person human performance becomes incredibly rare. And because it's rare, it commands massive value. The human element becomes the ultimate luxury good.
Think about your own screen time right now, or how ridiculously expensive concert tickets have gotten recently.
Oh my gosh, Taylor Swift tickets, right?
Exactly. The story's just extrapolating that trend. In 2030, the general public cannot afford to attend these live events. The cost is astronomically high. So the masses sit in their assigned living rooms, inside their geographically locked bubbles, watching the wealthy elite attend these events on their television screens.
It is the ultimate hypermodern update to the ancient Roman concept of bread and circuses.
Yes, perfect analogy.
You know, the Roman emperors figured out very early on that if you give the plebeians cheap grain and you put on spectacular gladiatorial games, they won't overthrow the government.
They'll be too entertained.
Right. They'll be too entertained and too full to riot. This 2030 story takes that ancient strategy and updates it to corporate calories and streaming media.
And it extends beyond just media. The story notes that public parks and global travel have reverted to being luxury assets reserved strictly for the elite.
Because you can't afford to get there.
Right. Cindy compares it directly to the social dynamics of the year 1910, before the advent of mass commercial air travel or widely accessible national parks. If you want to experience nature, you don't go to a park. You watch a wealthy person go to a park on a screen.
It's just wild. As long as the digital stipend covers the synthetic food delivery and the TV stays on, the invisible cage remains perfectly intact. The population is too distracted and frankly too dependent on the system's meager handouts to even think about challenging the architecture of their confinement.
It's a beautifully constructed trap. And this raises an important question, right? This realization leads to the final and perhaps most devastating moment in Tom and Cindy's conversation.
On the porch?
Well, inside the living room at this point, but yeah. After detailing this incredibly grim, oppressive reality, a reality where human agency is basically zero present, Tom looks out the window.
Yeah.
He sees the reflection of his warm, lamplit living room superimposed over the dark, quiet trees outside, and he turns to Cindy with this sobering realization. He says that they are the lucky ones.
Yeah. We were very lucky to just be where we are when things clicked into place. That line just gave me chills when I read it.
It's so heavy.
Because they happen to have a nice porch, a comfortable living room, a physical house when the music stopped and the system froze.
Oh.
They are in the top 10%.
Which means
The other 90% of the world is trapped in conditions that we can only imagine are much, much worse. Tighter bubbles, more dangerous environments, smaller digital stipends.
And Cindy pulling the blanket around her shoulders and agreeing with him. It perfectly underscored the tragedy of the invisible cage.
Yeah.
Even the people who can see the cage, the people like Tom and Cindy, who can articulate exactly how the algorithms, the real estate monopolies, and the government loops have trapped them, are ultimately forced to just sit back and be grateful that their particular corner of the cage has a nice sofa.
Oh.
They are pacified not just by entertainment, but by the overwhelming fear of how much worse it could be if they made a fuss and lost their current static position.
It's the paralysis of relative comfort.
That's a great way to phrase it.
And honestly, that is exactly why we explore these kinds of fictional narratives with you, the listener. Dystopian fiction isn't just about being pessimistic or trying to scare you.
No, not at all.
It acts as a funhouse mirror for society. It takes the subtle economic and technological trends of our current reality, the massive merging of corporate and state interests, our increasing reliance on digital infrastructure for everyday survival, the widening wealth gap, and it exaggerates them.
It blows them up.
Right. It blows them up so large that we can't ignore them. It forces us to think critically about where unchecked monopolies and algorithmic architecture could theoretically lead if we aren't paying attention. It makes the invisible cages visible.
Absolutely. It gives us a vocabulary to discuss things we feel but can't quite articulate in our everyday lives.
Exactly.
And, to leave you with something to really mull over as you go about your day, let's build on a passing thought Tom mentioned earlier in their conversation.
Okay, what was that?
He hypothesized that this new economy might eventually choke itself to death because it lacks organic human consumption.
Right, the broken triangle.
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of that deeply. If this business-government alliance successfully automates everything, if they use AI to run the supply chains, robots to do the labor, and algorithms to manage the geography, and they completely bypass the human consumer, relying solely on digital money loops between the state treasury and corporate bank accounts, what actually happens to the inherent value of their wealth?
Oh, wow, because wealth is just an agreed-upon fiction, right? Like, it only matters if we all agree it matters.
Precisely. Wealth only has meaning relative to the society that recognizes it and exchanges it.
Yeah.
If 90% of humanity is permanently locked out of the economic cycle, functioning merely as pacified observers in a frozen system, does the concept of wealth for that top 1% eventually lose all its meaning?
That is such a good question.
If money is just a digital tally mark on a server that never interacts with human need or human creation, is it still money? Or do the elite simply end up trapping themselves in a gilded cage of their own making, ruling over a perfectly automated machine that serves absolutely no human purpose?
A perfectly automated machine that serves no human purpose. Wow, that is a heavy, necessary thought to carry forward into the real world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the architecture of the world around you, keep looking for the invisible cages, and we will see you next time.
Dreaming with Eyes Open, Storydoy.